day, everybody. So we've, at the Network of Education Policy Centers, started a series of discussion with the experts from different fields. Of course, since we deal in education, it's mostly with educational experts. But today we have a slightly different perspective, and today we'll be joined with Mladen Domazet. Welcome. Who is who is a research director at the Institute of Political Ecology. And you might be all wondering what that is. So I will let Mladen give us a few sentences about the Institute, please. And thank you for agreeing to join us, of course.
And thank you for the invitation. And I look forward to having a nice chat on these very important topics. The Institute for Political Ecology is a research and advocacy institution. We're off the state budget, and we create narratives and explore new perspectives in the nexus of ecology and society, where ecology or environmental protection and understanding of the environmental processes and society meet. Our two main research streams are degrowth and democratization of public services, both connected to how ecology and society can address the major socio-environmental or socio-economic challenges of the 21st century. So we really see ourselves as the Institute for the 21st century.
Okay, well, yes, I think it's something that this society definitely, not only this, but society in a global sense needs. And it's great that we have an institute like that here in Croatia, but you are working Europe-wide, or would you say global?
Mainly Europe-wide. It's hard to work globally for the institute of our size, as well as our sort of base or origin. Croatia doesn't have a major global south outreach, but we are very active across Europe with partners, and especially in bringing these topics, which sometimes have a reasonable understanding within Western societies, to the specific context in societies of Eastern, Southeastern Europe, especially as it's often seen as the former Zweite Welt, or the Second World, this place that's neither too rich, but then neither poor. We used to call it, or still do technically call it, the semi-periphery, based on Wallerstein's division of core and periphery in globalized capitalist society. But it is very important that the work we do is rooted in the region where we sit and operate and mainly hail from, although I'd say 50-50 our activities are divided with actions in other European states or partnerships with other European organizations and action on the ground in Croatia and the region. So is our educational activity when we perform it, quite rooted in the region.
Okay. Yeah, one thing I didn't say is that somehow the connection between me and Mladen goes a long way, almost 20 years now, can you believe it? But also, yeah, we're getting older. But also you have kind of helped us bring the sustainability topics to education and to our work as a network. So yeah, there has been almost 10 years, I would guess, of this cooperation between yourself and network and our members on questions of education and sustainability. But of course, we are.
It's really interesting how 10 years ago the topics we were addressing seemed like fringe pioneer in a kind of, okay, we understand intellectually we have to do them, but they don't seem to be the urgency now. Whereas now, I think it's much clearer that those topics of bringing sustainability into education are the essential questions for both education and development of our societies in the next decade.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we've started this series of what do we learn from COVID-19 pandemic, as a lot of organizations have. and we are really trying to reflect and trying to kind of learn what we could learn from this and see what are maybe the main points that as a network or even as a society we should kind of focus on. And one thing that I think everybody learned in this last few months is the importance of public services. I think something that is clear to everybody is the public health, and what is the difference when you do have public health available for your citizens and when you don't. But of course, public education is also a part of it. So could you give us a little bit of your take on this topic?
Well, suddenly, within a few months, at least in Europe, we became shockingly aware of the importance of public services. For decades, we've been saying that they are sluggish, that they're wasteful. The neoliberal growth agenda has been saying they have to become more efficient. They should really privatize much of their output because the way they're doing it as these massive bureaucratized institutions or networks is too slow and inefficient. And now the shock of the COVID crisis came, or of the pandemic, basically, and um, and we realized that not only are they able to innovate when they need to, and that they have this inside them, and that they've been doing this all along, but we've been deliberately sidelining that work, but also that their widespread and firmness and the broad breadth of their network is crucial, and that we can't replace their function with individual, privatized, super efficient, high performing nodes, because then we lose the basically protective and supportive role of the overall service. It was most clear in the health situation, where we have uh, the difference in responses of the ancient post-socialist health systems of the Eastern European states versus situation in countries like UK or the US, where for a pandemic of this type, it really doesn't pay for anyone to force super expensive, super efficient, small nodes of medical treatment, but you need broad public health. Um, I think as the recession progresses, that follows this initial pandemic shock, we will increasingly see the importance of all other public services, and we have seen it to some extent in our situations of lockdown, in the fact that even though you're locked at home, your water is still running, you have electricity in the wires, you're increasingly using it. The quality of your broadband network directly affects on how well you can work, as well as how you can deliver education, which we'll mention. And the garbage is being disposed of, so we're not in 2 months of cities overflowing with putrid, rotting waste, which would be another source of new diseases. And basically, I think their role in society has become much more visible, but also what's become visible is how damaged they've been by neoliberal austerity that everyone's been practicing since the last financial crisis, and how different they are from the initial goal or ideal role we'd assigned to them when they were developed in the 20th century, as opposed to the state they're in now, even to the point that we have to turn shopping malls into emergency hospitals because we don't have enough hospital beds for pandemics of this type, or that we need to build new hospitals, etc., as well as how much overtime people in the health system suddenly have to put in and organize their lives around it, and how much other public services they're relying on. For instance, in Zagreb, public transport was almost shut down. Well, medical workers need to get to work somehow, and sure, they can drive in some cases, but often with the level of tiredness, with the strange hours that they have to attend to their work and stuff, a reliable and good and safe in terms of pandemic public transport would be a lifeline for them as well.
Mhm. Do you see any danger actually that, okay, so we now realize that, public health is something that everybody needs. I guess some of us were realizing that before, but is there any kind of danger now? I mean, because I see that this idea that public services are available, but still in education, I guess this has brought to the forefront how not everybody can do public education while they're at home, right? Um, do you think there is also a danger of kind of more privatization of education from this perspective?
Um, it's up to us to decide as societies. It's up to us to fight for it. There certainly is a danger. I mean, one thing that's happened with education, which I think viewers here particularly well know, is that it's been thrown into individual households. It suddenly has to, after years of upkeeping our schools, suddenly we have to rely on individual broadband networks and the technology that's available in the houses of individual people.
Mhm.
I think parents, in particular, as well as all members of households that have school age youth, they suddenly see a lot more of the work that's involved in education. It used to be a bit of a factory system where you send a child to school, you get a regular report. If the report is good or bad, you are invited to do some reaction, but now you actually see what they're going through. You see the lessons. You have to take a very active role in helping with those lessons, which often, due to higher workload on the parents who do have employment, it's been pushed back into schools with extra teaching, with full daycare, etc. Now it's all in the houses. Another thing we much more clearly see is the emotional support that's required in the time of crisis, and there have been mini crises in our countries and in our regions continuously, and education has been dealing with in the educational institutions and especially the educational workers. And now we see that in the household, how it's not just cramming your data from your last lesson, it's integrating that data into how you see the life, how you see future. And this thing that teachers or the school community peers as well were providing in offering support, a type of informal counseling and help with moving on, is now left to household members, or at least even if they're not performing, if it's still done online, they're now much more aware that it is happening, that it isn't just a list of things you have to remember and then reproduce the next day.
Mhm.
And of course, uh, because we are still under the uh, greater efficiency, greater productivity push for growth, uh, hegemony or leading idea or the view of the world, there is a danger that we would push for more privatization, saying, okay, these are the points where these things are working very well. This group of people, their online platform and their set of computers is functioning with high performance. Let's focus on pushing them or giving them a great chance, use them as examples, etc. The way we did perhaps with high performing schools, where sometimes in
Mhm.
school assessments we were prone to say, okay, this is down to a great team, a super principal leader, and I don't know, great understanding among children, disregarding the social circumstances in which the school is situated, what kind of homes these children live in, how the community around the school generally works, how the teachers live in the community and understand the community rather than perhaps a bust in or, you
Mhm.
know, visit for a few hours a day, etc. And I think it is clearer now to broader number of people that that has to be resisted if we want to keep the stability of the overall system, because this kind of competitive run will in the end kind of get us all or catch us all. You may seem like you're in a good spot now, but the way things are progressing 2 years down the line, you may no longer be the
Mhm.
super good node that is promoted, and you may fall by the wayside, which is a danger.
Mhm. I mean, one thing that we definitely see, I guess, and we've had reactions from parents on many levels, is that they now understand better the role of teachers and what it actually means to be a teacher. the importance of teachers, the importance of structure for their children. So yeah, I think these things are also coming up as good lessons, I would say, that we can really learn from and as a society move towards.
Well, there's
So
good, but
most,
there is
yeah.
bad. There is bad in those lessons as well, because you both as a child and the parent can start to feel that you're underperforming or that you're failing. And as the restrictions are easing up, as we understand the spread of the virus better, perhaps a creation of sort of self-organized, localized bubbles of pandemic security, where perhaps uh, parents who are better suited to a particular segment of education can help not only their own children but a broader community, is a way for us to self-organize and not allow a simple competition between those who are getting good grades in online testing, because for some
Mm-hmm.
clicking a multiple choice question online will be a real gem, and those for whom it's not so easy.
Mm-hmm. So it is also about community building from different perspectives.
I would
Yeah,
say
I agree
yes.
with. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the school in most countries somehow went online within days, and some countries were, of course, better prepared for it. Some schools were better prepared of it. Some teachers and some kids and so on. Um, but one of the big questions that comes up to my mind all the time is online school really school? I mean, can we really create this promise of technology that will save a lot of our I don't know, problems, I don't know, in many ways. And thinking that school can just, move to online and function the same way and have the same type of achievement from kids. Do you see that that online school is a school? What would you say?
Well, first of all, we have to massively congratulate, right after we congratulate the health workers for saving us from um, collapsing society of major pandemic spread. We then have to congratulate the teachers and the people who work in education on how quickly and successfully they adapted, even though not many of them trained in that environment. Not many of them were, I still consider myself reasonably young, but I'm struggling with online teaching, and this certainly isn't uh, both the method that we prepared for, or it's not even conducive to a lot of the content that we want to transmit or introduce, because a lengthy lecture or even a workshop interactively doesn't work in this setting. We're a bit like radio drama with faces, and we weren't trained for that. And a lot of teachers, almost none of the teachers, were trained for that, and yet they've somehow adapted very quickly, and they've taken it on, and they're handling it. And we have neither had a total strike of the education workers saying, "Look, this is not what we do," and goodbye, and nor have we had a massive failing of schooling in general, saying, "Okay, this doesn't work," and they're just watching a cartoon. So things are ticking on, and they're adapting, and this is a great, I'd say, a great victory and a great again example of how in the public services that we've so long, by the dominant narrative, been calling laggards or slow or bureaucratized, people are actually both interested in their work and innovative and willing to adapt. And when they love their job, they will take any instruments they have at their disposal to get the result, to get the job done, and get the kids moving on to a better state of learning. But we've
Yeah,
also,
can I just say I think one of the great things that we've noticed in our network is exactly what you say. This really willingness of teachers to take on this challenge, and also from our members, instant reaction of how we can support the teachers to actually do their jobs. And we have some wonderful examples in the network of how NGO has now become. Really a support sector for the teachers. I think that's another way of building a community. I think our biggest lesson in the network is that we can never stop teaching, but we can also never stop learning. So I think this is also what teachers across the world, but maybe for our region, of course, that we know better and look into really a big lesson for us. Of course, it does make some challenges for the system. It's not only about the willingness of teachers, but there is this whole idea of, we are living in societies which were already not not equal in many ways. Do you see that this crisis has how deepened this divide? Is the gap? Is it only the technological gap, or what happened with this
No,
equity?
the entire we again for a while we've been taking an eye off the emancipatory role of the school. How public education was primarily an inequality leveler. We can keep saying that everyone's got the same opportunities, but until we train them to have those same opportunities, we are basically saying empty words. And public education has been doing exactly that. It wasn't just giving literacy to your children; it was giving them a whole set of life skills. And now it's been thrown into a sharp visibility again. The focus has really been trained on the fact that not only were things unequal before, but the schools were serving the function of equality. Once you get into that building, you have reasonably similar dress, and often schools were training themselves to try and not accentuate the materialist differences between students. And then you also had a reasonably similar approach. Educational professionals were not exclusively treating kids like success winning machines, and they were helping out those who were in trouble and realizing potential and finding avenues where you could excel to fulfill your life's goals, even if your family doesn't realize it, etc. But of course, it was always in the in the matrix of social inequalities. And now it's become much sharper because now the school has come to your house, and then the conditions in your house, your family, from the technological to the that general kind of social and cultural capital background that you have in the house. You now no longer have a school library, but maybe you have a big library resource at home. Maybe your parents have more flexibility, more time. Maybe your other inhabitants of your household can help you slowly train and catch up. Whereas in some households, it's entirely not possible, especially if your parents uh, either work from home in long hours where they have to be connected to a computer and therefore disconnect you as a child, or in many cases, which we're forgetting, large segments of our society are still working outside, even in situations of lockdown. Somebody was taking away that garbage, somebody was driving whatever was left of the public transport, somebody was going into the hospital. And obviously, then you're disadvantaged compared to someone who perhaps can be more flexible about assisting the uh, school age children at home.
Mhm. Yeah, so the divide somehow is more sharp. Some though, what my biggest worry is that it has become invisible, maybe because we now don't see these children. I mean, when they come to school, they're in my classroom, and maybe I can recognize a problem, a situation. Often, I think there was a study by Step in Croatia about how many children in poverty are actually not attending school at all.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't, not only are they not receiving education, but you don't even see them. That's my kind of biggest worry, that somehow this moving, and for us who have the advantage that we can stay at home, work from home, have the technology and everything else, it can be out of our focus. So this is something that I think really is for educational workers when they go back to school and when the lockdown finishes. I think as important what happened now while we were online is what kind of preparations they will do for coming back to school, and how they will provide service for the kids who weren't able to attend school or not fully attend school online. And
Absolutely.
this is.
I, I support that, but I would warn you of the massive crisis that we're facing now that a lot of our semi peripheral societies have introduced standardized testing. And when standardized testing is applied to these massively unequal situations of learning, we will get a sharp divide between those who can excel in the tests and those who basically are lagging because of the conditions of their own learning. Now, again, you could say that was always present with the performance of individual schools, and which school you went to could also affect your final test results. But I think it was uh, maybe more visible, maybe work was done on that, whereas now we could simply have a shock of high performers and then a gap and then low performers, and we'll create a two-tier education system, which is exactly the opposite of what we wanted with education in society in the first place.
Also, I think one thing that is somehow forgotten, and these children, these students, are also living through a crisis. I mean, which is a major thing in their life. I mean, they have never lived through this like we haven't. They have never lived through this crisis. We could have lots of socio-emotional problems that these kids are they're facing, and maybe they do not need to think now about testing. Especially a test which will decide on their life whether they will, go into the university they wanted to or not, or finish the training that they started. So I think this extra stress that we're putting on them with the assessment is really quite dangerous. And I hope that we will, as a society, find a way. I mean, Italy has done an interesting thing. They have decided that nobody will fail the final test this year. So the last grades of secondary school, you cannot fail it. Which I think in
Sure.
this type of situation, it might be a solution that at least does not discriminate against those who maybe just couldn't study because they were scared, for
But
example,
there's
if nothing
there
else.
and absolutely, but then there's the other danger that it'll invalidate the entire test, because if everybody who is supposed to rely on the test knows that nobody could fail, then what does the pass mean? Um, we need sort of smart adjusting. But another shock of this type of testing is that our systems are not well equipped with dealing with this situation, as they were not equipped with dealing with unsustainability of our imperial mode of
Mm-hmm.
living in Europe. And now it's again been brought very much to the forefront of the attention of the students. What kind of world am I inheriting? What kind of jobs am I preparing for? What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And what's my role in the society going to be? Whereas our tests will still be asking about the political conditions of ancient Egypt, um, without reference to perhaps the pandemics or the climate crisis which affected that particular ancient empire. And of course, it's part of the culture that we need to learn, but it also feels distant and strange even more now that the world's been thrown out of joint. The curtain's been pulled back, and we now see more clearly what this world we live in is like. And us, our educational content is not necessarily reflecting that, because for a while it had been deliberately trying to ignore it by saying, "Don't look that way. We'll fix it, but focus on uh, keeping the system going." You will
Mm-hmm.
have to be an industrial worker, or you will have to make extra money in order to secure your own long-term or old age safety. And perhaps we need to have a discussion both in the societies how crucial that is in these conditions, and also education perhaps needs to think on how well it reflects in its content the realities, the now visible realities of the situation we're in.
Mm. I mean, a lot of people are talking about the fact that the world stopped at one point. Almost the whole world stopped. We stopped flying. We stopped traveling. We stopped doing many things that we were doing. And there is also a lot of this talk about how people in Wuhan now see the sky for I don't know after how long. And they connect this to kind of a story. Well, actually, we have now spent less CO2 or whatever in the last 2 months, and maybe this is enough, and the climate will now be fine. Is it? What do you think? What are the effects on the thinking on sustainability, even if not if not on real change in the way we do things?
Well, there are positive and negative effects, as there are with everything. In one sense, we are valuing nature much more, and we are much more aware of how close it is to us, even to the point that you have to wear a mask so that a natural object would not only bring an illness to you, but endanger your entire community. a lot of us expect that we can walk through the illness ourselves, but it's the vulnerable members of our community that we need to protect, and then it's the entire system. So, like all the vulnerable members that we want to protect. And walking the streets of Zagreb last night, not very late, at around 11, I saw a ferret for the first time, and this is a wild Croatian ferret, not an escaped pet. And I don't know how this. Maybe this animal had always been visiting the city center. Maybe it's got an entire family somewhere, but I haven't seen them before, either at that hour or in that place. So we are becoming more aware of how close we are to nature and how everything we do as humans and as civilization and as society is basically immersed in nature, and then both affects nature and is affected by nature. And this is the major topic that we deal with in political ecology. And again, that's another one that's now, I think, clearer to everyone. But it, we have also then seen which of our activities um, which of our activities can be replaced with much more ecologically sound ones. I don't enjoy my Zoom meetings, but in the particular job I'm doing on one of the projects, Zoom meetings have replaced about 20 flights I was supposed to do. And that is a massive difference, even when we account for the carbon emissions of the servers that run the entire Zoom system. Or online conferencing system. Um, but then the crucial message is that that's not what we need, or that's not enough. This was a realization. This was the slap in the face, which makes you sort of stop screaming and open your eyes or something. But the projection is that even with the coming recession, we're likely to reduce the global emissions by 10%, is the most optimistic projection, and we need to reduce them by 100% within a few decades. And we can't reduce them to 100% with this type of action. So we need a reorganization of society. We really need a deep introduction of degrowth thinking into our strategizing of how we go about life, how we create social institutions, how we produce and consume things, why we produce and consume things, rather than simply saying, okay, we'll hunker down a bit, we'll cut down on the flights, and then that's it. This kind of situation can't go on very long. We need to have certain economic activities which will start replenishing the stocks of commodities that we're now using in our stop lockdown space. But we also need to rethink which of the economic activities were unjustifiably burdensome on both society and nature. I can tell you that a lot of these meetings I was supposed to fly to could have been resolved with a few emails. And we need to redesign a society to then respect that. And this is the time to do it. We are definitely in line for another pandemic in the next few decades, but we don't have another few decades to wait for this kind of warning or shock. We have about 10 years to start seriously to level off our entire global emissions and then start seriously to bring them down. In the conditions where climate is generally worsening, even with such actions, because it's a very inertial and slow system. And now is the time to wake up, and especially for those school children who are watching the build-up of the climate movement prior to the COVID crisis, who are now watching the reactions to the COVID crisis and the way it affects their lives. I think they are well placed to start saying, okay, guys, a lot of it has to change if I'm going to reach my retirement age in good condition and in a good society.
Do I hear this? I don't know if I should call it optimism or how a call for action maybe. And do you see that the youth are the ones that can lead this type of change? Will we give them enough space to do it also?
I don't know. I can't seriously predict that. If I had to bet, then I wouldn't, because betting is not something I do. We've been ignoring them very successfully for the past 2 years. Greta may have sailed across the Atlantic. She may have screamed her lungs off, saying, "Come on, you're not doing anything. You're not listening." She was given a high platform and hugs from every minister or decision maker that she could come across of, and nothing's been done. In the end, it was treated as an issue that is simply of particular concern to a generation, a group of people within a generation, but that can still be postponed until the generation comes of age to start making these decisions themselves. As young Greta was once told that she needs to study economics first and then start talking about the changes that are required.
Yeah.
So I think they need to be even louder now.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess it's our responsibility to give them the platform as much as we can and to support them in this, not only by listening but also by joining them somehow in this fight. Because of course, we can always all be dismissed as some people who want something that is impossible, because this story of growth has been sold to so many so successfully, that it's really difficult. But yes. Um,
Well, the impossible
yeah.
picture has been changed now. We've been told it's impossible to stop the economy, it's impossible to stop flying, it's impossible to make massive public investment into public services, which is what climate action was demanding. And now then it's happened in a few weeks
Yeah.
in Europe. I think what we need to do is not go out in the streets and protest with them, or rather we need to do that as well. But that's again an easy way out for us. We need to start changing our lives. If we are part of the problem, we need to stop being part of the problem. The way we work and what we worked on has to change right now for all of us, so that we would open a space for them to innovate it and adapt it to the size of the challenge that they're facing. Because we're a bit like, remember there was a minister of science and education in Croatia who entered into a conflict with a group of students occupying a faculty who were not pleased with the way education was funded. They demanded public funding for higher education, and they waited for him outside a radio interview and started shouting, "Resign, resign." And then this dude didn't know what else to do, but he joined them in shouting, "Resign, resign," for his own resignation. Now, that's kind of what we do when we shout rather than change. Uh,
Okay.
of course, he didn't resign. He looked ridiculous, but nothing changed. He simply did a simple, if you can't beat them, join them. But that's not what was expected of him, was to genuinely resign or change the action
That,
that's within
yeah.
the purview of his ministry, rather than simply chant in the street with the protesters.
Yeah, I think this maybe we will end on this note about that this crisis or pandemic has taught us a lot about intergenerational solidarity, especially towards the elderly, where we all kind of did our best to protect the elderly from the virus because they were somehow the most vulnerable in this situation. I guess this intergenerational solidarity has to go in all different types of ways. And not only should we listen to the youth and support them, but also we should change the ways that we do some things. Mladen, thank you very much for this talk. Sorry, go ahead. Do say
No,
something.
I could go on about intergenerational solidarity, but perhaps a reminder that we were not just protecting the elderly. Research shows that everyone who's died in this crisis has, on average, died 10 years earlier than they should have. And that is a tragedy for our idea of life. We think that we live in societies which can prevent us dying 10 years too soon, whatever is defined as too soon. Now we have to turn that kind of perspective onto the new generations, because we are basically bringing 20-year premature death as well as much harder life to them. We're saying you won't reach 80 because you won't have the life supporting conditions. And we need to act now to be able to say to them, okay, here's a fair fighting chance that you too can live up to 80 if living up to 80 is a full life.
Yeah, I guess the message of solidarity is something that should go intergenerational, intercountry, not keeping the solidarity only to our community and the closest ones, but the idea of solidarity is much, much bigger than that. And we do have responsibility towards the generations that are coming behind us. I think Mladen, thank you very much. We'll close this talk now. It was really enjoyable for me. I hope our audience will enjoy it as well. And maybe just as a quick announcement for the future, we're planning a summer school, an online summer school for NEPC, the first one, in the beginning of July. And Mladen will be joining us for that with more on these types of topics. Mladen, thank you very much. It was really a lot of fun.
Thank you for the invitation. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you. Bye-bye.